Welcome back, audience. Hope you're doing good. As always. Cheers. My green tea. I put a little bit of tea liquor in it to make Irish. Not to, you know, get drunk, but I don't know. It just has that. Just makes it so much better. So, anyway, there's something that's been popping up, I suppose. And I started seeing something, and I always see things, but patterns. But this one is very interesting. I mean, they're all interesting. But this one interesting right now. So, and you know what I want to talk about? I want to talk about this idea of portals. Because I was thinking about everything that I'm talking about. Sometimes people call it abstract. It is not abstract at all. But it may come across as an abstract thing if there's no frame for it. That's the importance of this, what I call the horizontal development. You got to, use mind where mind's supposed to be used, and that is about having the structure. To navigate this world of consciousness, you must have that structure. You see, the point of it all is that it's not visible. So you have to discover that structure. But once you discover that structure, you have to give it a form. And there's at the fundamental level, at the principle level, you cannot give it any other form than it is like that. Then later you can make it a symbol out of it or whatever, be more metaphorical if you like, right? Or create your branch of lexicon about that thing. But when you're referring to that particular state of consciousness or that structure of consciousness, you know that you're referring to exact thing that you can experience. And there are these universal principles, and one of these universal principles are portals. You can use any other type of word, but there's one thing that you cannot deny, is that there is this openness and there is this stream. There's a stream and there is this openness. Everything starts with this. This is why I really like the toroidal dynamics, because you can see in the toroidal dynamics how everything works. There is openness and a stream in one, and you have that reciprocating toroidal field. One energy is flowing like this, another one is flowing like that. And the feminine is whenever it's flowing away from the center and it's expanding. That's openness. The masculine is whenever flowing towards the center and is contracting. Right? And so you can see that at the top, if the motion is like that, that's feminine. Okay? So it's very interesting that it's not even a direction, because at the top, direction down is masculine. At the bottom, direction down is feminine. You see? And if you go at the bottom, direction up is masculine. At the top, direction up is feminine, because it's expanding. So this is why it's the yin and yang are not two separate things, but what it is doing, because it's all connected and cohesive. And this is why people through the duality way of seeing world cannot reconcile those two things, and they think that they're separate. They think that the feminine masculine is a separate thing. But from this perspective, you can see they're like, oh, wait a second, they're not a separate thing. They're actually one thing, participating in a different roles. And what we call it feminine is actually the expansion. We call it masculine is actually the contraction. Use any other words if you like, but this is something that you cannot deny, because it's the metaphysical truth and the physical truth, as this world reflects the electromagnetism, which is a fundamental dynamics of consciousness. Of course, if you go all the way to the zero, by the way, like everything that I'm talking about would make way more sense, and maybe even you could be able to relate it. And then I say that a person must be flashed. I don't know how else to say it, but like a zeroed out at least once, with no drugs, with no psychedelics, so just with your own consciousness, being either guided or yourself to get to that point of I don't know how to call this thing, but you can get to it. And this is what again, if you have not done it, if you haven't been flashed, so to speak, book a session with me. I'm going to keep on inviting you until you do it. Otherwise, what you're listening here is entertainment. It is not supposed to be entertainment, at least not in this video. I may have some entertainment value, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be an invitation to play the game of life, and not to be played by the game of life. That's the difference, because a lot of people may come in playing this game and they're being played by it, believing that they are playing the one that they're playing. This is why I separate, only through the point of the holistics do you even begin playing the game of life. People call enlightenment as a goal. Enlightenment is not a big deal. What's a big deal for me is to be able to play the game of life from that point of wholeness. Okay, to me that's massive. This is why people call it renouncing the world and whatnot. Again, I think because from this side you see things very differently. Even renunciation is not what people think, because this is why sometimes people misunderstand and they renounce their like living in a city, for example, or living as a part of society, and go do the monastery things and whatever, right? This is not it. The true renunciation is this, what I'm talking about, is to finally end the suffering through moving your attention and awareness until attention and awareness become one, and then you enter that state of stillness. If you do this once, and I found out it is the best to do it with somebody who's doing so to speak with you, right? Because when I'm doing this with people, what I do is I actually go where they are at. I find where they are at by talking and whatnot, and then because I know where they're at, I know exactly how they're feeling, then I'm moving closer to that zero and asking the right questions and whatever that the person would make their motion sort of like follow me. Say, okay, what about this? And eventually they fall through and they enter it. And that's what I would call the person that has been flashed. I don't know how else to say it, but there is something that was before and after. Psychedelics can do that temporarily, but you have not done that. This is why you can't just go there, because you went there through psychedelics temporarily, and it may have reset all of the baggage that you had built up, but does not mean that you're going to be able to process the new baggage, because it's always building up, without psychedelics. So some people are just relying on psychedelics to keep on resetting themselves, but that does not mean that they have discovered by themselves through their own consciousness of how to reset without psychedelics. And it's not even how to reset yourself without psychedelics. It's about living the life at that liminal space. That's the art. Okay. Out of which all sorts of psychedelic effects may happen to you naturally. It's fascinating to me, but it does happen naturally. This is what people call soma, because it's you, when you're alchemizing the energies, you're producing, I don't know, I would like people to research this, but it's very likely that it's DMT or some other compounds, but you are, through being in a certain state of consciousness, are producing the chemicals, and I suppose, like, moving a certain state of consciousness produces certain neuropeptides and other chemicals naturally. Like, why would your body do that, right? Because it's a state of consciousness, and then it stimulates it again. The state of consciousness deepens, produce more chemicals. You see what I'm trying to say? And so you naturally, like that, can move into these psychedelic states of consciousness, but they're usually much more clean. They're so much more crisp, because when you take psychedelics, they do take their toll, and things may get distorted, and and whatever, right? But I would also say that it's better for people to once in a while, like, take a psychedelic and reset themselves if they don't have this capacity to do this naturally through their own consciousness. I think it's better than not take psychedelics and be in that motion of suffering. But at the same time, we're here to recognize that this is where they're at. Now, also, because people, when they rely on psychedelics, and psychedelics reset them, there might be a problem there, because that ultimate openness may still not be achieved. Does that make sense? For example, if you take something like 5-MeO or DMT at a high enough doses, you do get to that complete reset, peace, and stillness. 5-MeO seem to be able to do that. Other psychedelics, like ayahuasca, they may not take you all the way to that. It's like a gradual effect for longer periods of time. This is why ayahuasca I do not recommend, because of this reason. Because it depends on so much on the setting, the people that you're in, and because you're not broken through, and if there's no shaman who's naturally broken through the source, and not people, and there's nothing to take those dark energies and transmute them, then they just like interchange. They go from one body to another, and then people bring home like really nasty stuff. This is why I do not recommend ayahuasca. And some people think that if they have not tried ayahuasca, if they've tried DMT and they have not tried ayahuasca, that there's some sort of other type of benefit there. There isn't. This is why there's a danger of going into this type of like temptation, like you may get into like some sort of zone like of entertainment and all these clowns and whatever, and then get stuck in your real life. Now you're operating at that thing. Now you're interested in these types of things and whatnot, and they're all just like temptations and distraction from the real life. And you have like this idea that like, oh, you're exploring consciousness, but you're not doing any of the sorts. You're just trapped in one of the little game rooms that is just like simulating to you what you think is real. And this is why I found a lot of people who do ayahuasca are still very dark people. Just because somebody takes psychedelics, it does not mean that they are egoless. Okay? In fact, sometimes, I was thinking, okay, so there's a person and you can clearly see he's acting from the ego, and he's running his life from the ego. They take psychedelic or like DMT or 5-MeO, and they connect to that ultimate oneness and then experience it for a brief moment of time. Now what's going to happen next? The ego is going to come back online. And when it's going to come back online, now you have that contrast between what your ego is in that ultimate state. And it may create a lot of problems. Because if you have not touched that naturally with your own consciousness, you won't be able to deal with the things that are going to come your way. So it almost becomes very important for a person who tried out psychedelics. They either keep going back there, and it's people say, well, we cannot be addicted to psychedelics. Yes, you can. And it is not this type of addiction where you take every day to keep afloat. Like it could happen like with alcohol. But you may not need to take it you may not need to take more than like every 6 months or even a year. Because over the year, if you have not alchemizing anything, all of that is accumulating, and then when you get to the point where you cannot even process it, you go back and take psychedelic. Okay? But if you do have that natural capacity, you don't need psychedelics to go to these states. And even if you do use them, they're just more like you don't need a lot, and they give you more like an enhancing quality rather than you completely relying upon them. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're supposed to talk about portals. Okay, so I said that there is like this openness and a stream. Why is it so important to see the life as its portals? Because when we're talking about like the causal reality, which are energies, and if you don't know where you're at the point of the energy, for example, if something's going on and you're moving through the state and something's happening, whatever that may be, and if you don't know that you're, for example, on the cusp of entering some sort of portal, then you are not really good at navigating. Does that make sense? This is why this horizontal knowledge, this is where knowledge is important, because we destroy the knowledge in the heart, right? Because you have to have no knowledge in the heart, because when you have no knowledge in the heart, you have intelligence. And when you have intelligence in your heart, then knowledge is necessary still to navigate consciousness, but only as a tool. You still need it. If you don't have it, I was thinking, so what? Okay, so right now in our modern society, we found that vertical development is lagging, and horizontal is kind of speeding up. But if we catch up with the vertical development, and psychedelics does definitely help people to do that, even though they will still gonna have to go through finding their center in a natural way somehow, because otherwise they're just gonna depend on psychedelics every year or whatnot, right? But it's still better than being in this Babylonian cycle of suffering and addictions, being addicted to things, right? Still better, still way better. Okay. Now, the portals. When you do have that knowledge of exactly, when you know exactly where you're at, you use your brain, that brain that you used to be wasted on thinking about like some negative feeling, then emotion, and then a negative thought, right? That was like a reverse use of your thinking or your brain. This type of thinking, it is not like that. This type of thinking is in the correct direction, because when you're bringing the energy through or entering the state, right? For example, if you want to control that state or move to a different state, you cannot do it without the capacity of your brain. Okay? This is where the measurement becomes important. Right? And so that's why you have that horizontal and vertical dimensions collaborating. Pure intelligence and then pure knowledge. And then they are collaborating, or intellect, as some people may say. So now you have right. The question would be, what happens when people go way vertical, but they don't forget the horizontal development? You know what happens? It happens, somebody who, I don't want to like insult anybody, but there's no application of the energy. They may feel amazing and they be in bliss, but they're not creating anything with it. It's not necessarily bad, but I'm saying that it lacks horizontal development. This is what happens. This is what you have these, you know, gurus and whatnot, right? Most of them are fake, but even if the ones that are real, they're just in that energy, and you can feel that they definitely are in a state of consciousness, or they emanate something there. And it was like, okay, I've only met one person like that. I mean, everybody has their state of consciousness, but I only met one person who was just like, like a walking psychedelic, basically, But he was boring as fuck. He was boring as fuck. Just walking around, people around him, doing everything, for him. No personality there, no creativity. He's not doing anything with his life. It's just like this freaking portal to the energy. I don't consider this healthy. These are what they call them, these pratyeka Buddhas, where they just leave and they say, like, well, now I don't engage in any kind of worldly desires. No. Oh, and I want to say something about this wrong thing that people understand about what Buddha said. Apparently, that you suffer because you desire. This was mistranslation. He did not say that. I can guarantee you he did not say that. You suffer not because you desire. You suffer because you need to fix that desire in the reverse way. The desire is not a problem. But when you try to fix the desire in the reverse way, because this particular soul desire may be asking for your attention and connecting the right dots in your heart, and then it becomes mind desire and body desire. So desire is a driving force of life. The problem that happens is that people go around it the wrong way, and you will always go around it the wrong way if you don't have that capacity to zero it out. This the zero thing out, or whatever you want to call it, we have to have a name for it, even though liminal space, that's probably the best name for it, because it's infinity, and the person has not started their life until the person is capable of being that liminal space. And some people it's kind of easy. For me, it's not easy. For me, it's like a how to say, okay, so let's get to this concept of portals, and it ties into what I was just about to say. The reason, okay, before I used to say that sometimes, as these time fractals go, every day, every week, every month, every year, there's these time fractals that have a specific structure that you have to kind of like alchemize them. You got to live through them, and they go into like 4 different distortions, which are like negative feelings. I call them pain, pressure, confusion, and poison. Okay, and because I've been doing and trying to be in that liminal space, which is a consciousness calibration kind of thing, and really that's what the true meditation is. True meditation is alchemy. Nothing to do with the mind and soul. The heart is actually you're focusing where the source of your quote unquote suffering. But as soon as you place your attention, but that's another thing I want to say, that it has to be the right balance for that attention and awareness, the right balance between the complete background and then the foreground. And this is how you decode that problem that's been presented to you. And the only thing that can decode it is a quantum computer, right? This is how you actually leave the matrix. If you are not zeroed out, you're not out of the matrix. So now you have these time fractals keep on coming, and you keep on alchemizing and staying in that liminal space. But what you're actually doing, which, look, it helps to see that invisible energy, and give it a little bit of form at that primordial level. Because if you look at it, there's 4 types of distortions, which is like 4 elements. And you can see them based on the toroidal dynamics. When you split the toroidal field and you have the upper and the lower, it creates 4 possible types of distortions. And the types of masculine distortions, which are basically this contraction, right, which is usually pain or poison, and then there's expansion, which is usually confusion and pressure. Okay, and these are the feelings that you may end up feeling. But what are those feelings? I discovered that the pain and pressure, which are usually those 2 most important feelings, are the challenge of the games trying to take you off your throne. Okay? The pain is trying to make you give up, but as soon as you give up, you enter in a state of anxiety or fear. Okay? But the pressure is a type of portal that is also trying to, okay, so it's like there's two energies. One is trying to push you into this, and another one is trying to suck you out of it. If it pushes you into this, then you enter the state of anxiety and fear, out of your center, out of your throne. If it sucks you into this feminine side, you enter into depression. Okay? And you may say, why would one of the other things that can happen? And so then you have this domination and temptation. Okay? I've learned this because if I'm in the public and I can feel that pain in my solar plexus or my chest, this is usually around men. Sometimes, very rarely, around some women. But these women usually have this phallic mother archetype. They're very masculine. And, well, you know, most of them are lesbians, basically. Or just these, you know, man blood-sucking bitches. Anyway, they carry this archetype. Okay? So there's that side. Then there's another side where usually happens with those like Instagram girls and, you know, all these like sexy looking girls. That's the temptation, right? The domination and temptation. The pressure is a temptation. The pain is domination. And so you gotta be able to stay in between in the liminal state in front of all of these energies. Okay? And so this way you take that energy from the matrix and you put it in something good. And this is why, for example, if you by yourself, there's a limit. There might be a limit of how much energy you can build up by just alchemizing being by yourself. Sometimes you don't have to be with anybody. Sometimes these time fractals come along and you're like, oh shit, I can't be around people right now. I have for the next few hours, I have to deal with this somehow. But you do, and with that capacity to zero yourself out in that liminal space, anything can be handled. Okay, and so if you give in, like I said, if you give in to the anxiety, you're gonna do something to do with the anxiety. If you give in to the, if you give in to the pain, you're gonna be in a state of anxiety, and this is what may also drive you to do things. Then if you go into the temptation, you give in to the depression. Okay, and so it may make you, put you in this world of domination and make you get you involved in some sort of like conflicts that are not necessary and stuff like that, and playing that domination game. Because there's the fallacy about domination is that neither of sides are actually dominant. It's this space where it's completely been neutralized that is actually dominant, and that's just domineering. Okay, so you don't want to get in that thing, which is you will just end up in some stupid ass conflict. Okay, so you don't want to. If you go the other way, you may end up in being seduced and having that type of lust-based sex and whatnot. I'm just giving examples. There's a lot of escapes, because once you're into that portal, then it's very difficult to go back into liminal space, because it's already kind of programming you and all these ego lust and wrath, hate, desires that arise. Desire is not even a good word anymore, but it's just like a tantrums. And then you may be in this, and then you may even convince yourself like, oh, this is a good idea, and then you go into that, let's say, lust-based sex, and then sure enough, you're super depressed after that, and then you may be swinging into the anxiety, and you see what I'm trying to say. You've just been sucked into the matrix, executed the matrix programming for this hedonistic pleasure, whatever it may be. And now you're like in a matrix recycling portal. This is why when people take psychedelics, they come out of that and they enter that liminal space and like, oh shit, I can live in that liminal space here, like, and it becomes easier to do, to be there. So I'm just describing and I'm trying to give a little bit of like a picture and an image of what's going on at that level. You want to remain in that liminal space. But the game will always try to, as long as you're in time, space, and you are in an era where time spaces has these distortions, because apparently there are time eras where there are no distortions, like a gold age, for example, right? The golden age. And it looks like right now, according to all of these all of that information out there, that we're like 50-50. So you live in time where the challenge was going to be there whether you like it or not, and you're going to have to deal with that challenge because it's a video game. But that's the first thing. If you have not dealt with this, you are not really playing the game. You see how important it is to remain that liminal state? That's where the game starts. When you live in that liminal state, only then you may engage in world of magic and understand why and how, what are your freedoms, what you can do with it. Now you're doing it right. You earned your crystals of energy, so to speak, to use for the magic. You're not stealing them from other souls. You see, you're not a dark lord or a dark lady, if you will. Which, by the way, are not really free entities. They have been played by the code, so to speak. This is why I separate those two very clearly, because this is the only thing that needs to be separate. Either something is a whole or fragmented, right? And if you live your life and you always, that fragmentation is being forced upon you, and you know how to navigate, you always use that energy that was trying to pull you out of that center. You use that to charge yourself up even more. Okay, and that's what I would call like the mastery of alchemy. And you become better and better at these things, and build up more and more of that energy. And that energy is real. And can you build up a lot of that energy, and then the next art is circulating that energy, so to speak. And that's theurgy, is to be able to circulate that energy in the psychedelic like state. I'm learning this, but it's another challenge. This is why I don't talk a lot about this, because I can only talk to somebody about this that are already came to this point. Like, it's a post-alchemy type of game. This is why a lot of people, when they would read about theurgy, it would be not really relevant in their life, unless they already are good at the game of alchemy. Krishnamurti, by the way, was alchemist, and he never used that word. Never heard him use that word. Everything he talked about, he was pointing to that process of alchemy. Eckhart Tolle also talks about that. that liminality. And I call it courage and surrender. I specifically use that word for the capacity of your heart capacity. Your heart can only surrender or or be like in a state of courage. Surrendering is expanding, and courage is contracting. Sometimes you have to like call your energy like this, and then expand. And that's how, for example, you would deal with the pain. I go where the pain is. I focus there. I go deeper and 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 deeper, where there's like the most highest intensity point, and then I use surrender to, and now I can sit in that high intensity point that would normally would be excruciating pain. You won't be able to be there, but because of the capacity of surrender, now I'm in a completely different state, which is usually bliss, and I've just took that energy of fire, turn it into the light. So there's the fire and the water challenges for the sake of simplicity in this video. There are, of course, the air and earth challenges as well. But most of the challenges are you're going to be dealing with this, especially when you go out in people. This is why, like, I don't. After I said that there's only one ego, I'm doing my best not to take anything personal anymore. It is very strange and very weird to live a life like that. In comparison of how I used to, but it's the most healthy, the most sane way, actually. Because now, like, if I meet somebody, I don't say like, well, that's their ego, this is not my ego. You see how that can trap you? There's only one ego. There's only one ego, and if that person is right in front of me and that energy is entering me, it is my responsibility. I know some people say like, oh no, like it's not yours, you gotta let people be where they're at. When people holding themselves closed off and they don't just jump into my heart, then they are in their own space. It means that they deal with it themselves. But if they do just jump into my heart, because I'm not doing anything, but the one thing that I won't do is that I won't close off, because if there's something painful entering me now, so if I close off, I go back into ego again. And so it is not up to me. If I go with other people or whatever I am, everywhere I go, whatever energy enters me is my responsibility. And most of the time, I can deal with it and I can alchemize it, and no problems. Sometimes it's a little too much in some cases. And technically it is not too much, but I, for some reason, just want to dig deeper into that. And of course it makes it worse, but then it makes it a much stronger alchemy, I suppose. I suppose the reason I'm doing this is because I still want to investigate things and go into complete darkness, rather than to just alchemize it superficially. So sometimes I go into the real darkness. I'll go very, very deep, and then I alchemize that. But that may take me out for a little bit. Like the thoughts may start, these negative thoughts may start popping up and everything. But this is a part of the thing that if you want to investigate the darkness, I have complete trust that I will alchemize anything. This is why I can go through it and have the thoughts that these really dark people have, and see the thoughts of the people who are abusing and the people who are being abused, and all these thoughts that are there. And but then as always, go into emotions, feelings, zero it out, and then I have a good energy and I create whatever I want out of that. But if I go out of it and I cannot go back into that liminal space, the danger is that I may give in to Babylonian temptations and whatnot. Does that make sense? Because I'm completely now vulnerable and the matrix is running inside of me. Unless I have like complete and total attention to zero it out, it may take me over and I might do something stupid. Okay? That's the danger of going way too dark. That's why I think you gotta like know how much you can handle and deal with that. And this is why, like, if there's a lot of going on and you already deal with, like, maybe don't go out, maybe don't go into people, maybe don't talk to people. But if you're good, you're blissing out, go with people. See if you can remain in that bliss, because when you're blissing out and you go with people, the matrix detects that energy, that true bliss energy, and is going to challenge it. And if you are good at the alchemy, you'll be able to defend in your throne and take that fire with somebody. Try to use fire against the light. Of course, it never wins. But that does not mean that you don't need to have like incredible attention and that capacity to navigate in that liminal space. And to me, it is a bit of a skill, like a first skill that you have to learn. I don't know, some people say like when they go into that, they just blissing out all the time. It doesn't happen to me because I have to deal with people and go and, you see what I'm trying to say, like the challenges is still there. I'm just becoming better at it. That's what I would say. Okay. So that's the first portal to understand. And if you understand this portal, and that one is trying to suck you out, and the other one's going to push you into that dual state in your heart, then the first order of business is to remain that liminal space. Okay, wherever you do, you still need to live life. You can't avoid doing things in life. You're still living life. You're going to be challenged, and you're gonna have to deal with that on the heart level. And this is only the beginning of life. Like I'm just realizing. I'm just realizing that that's just the beginning of life. Sometimes people call like a born again. That is that birth. And Neville Goddard was also talking about this being reborn kind of thing. But to remain in a liminal state, I have to say, is a constant dying and being born. It's a continuous flux. It's constant dying and being born, dying, being born, dying, being born. Comes in something into existence and dissolves into the void. Comes into existence, and that's primordial flux. I call it primordial flux. And then you learn what to do with that primordial flux. And what you do with that primordial flux is you create things. Because you don't have right to create if you don't have ink. Right? This is why I don't point to people on this magic and manifestation and things that you notice that I don't go there a lot. And I keep on pointing onto this because I know that all of that will be important only on this through when you went through this portal and you live in that liminal space. Then you have that real energy, real confidence, real innocence to create something. And you have to protect it while you're in this life, you have to protect it. That's your alchemy and devotion game. And then you go into when you have that energy, then you go into this world of theurgy, thaumaturgy, and physiurgy, or like the soul magic, mind magic, and body magic. Then you enter that. And I'm just dipping my toes into this world, and I'm writing my book about it. And but I know how to zero things out. I basically can perform, and now I'm learning to do this silently, basically, to perform like you would call like a silent exorcism. Where I could go in some place. Now I'm saying everything here, but it's all right. Like, I mean, this is part of it. This is not, of course, for a lot of people. This is such a this is such a masculine way of approaching life, which is important, but it's very masculine, meaning that it's looking at the world as this electromagnetic phenomena. And yes, it does make you a great player of life, for sure. But also, you don't want to get stuck onto this technicality. This is why I just want to rediscover within myself that these universal principles, and shape it into the model that is actually as accurate as possible of what's really going on. You know, that key, that primordial key. And then out of that key, you can create anything else you want. And I think this is where I'm going to stop. You know, just and everything like that is going to be in my book. So now, as you enter this world of creative process, now you have this energy, this primordial energy, this bliss, peace energy. You can turn it into which is like ultimate intelligence. You can turn it into specialized intelligence. Energy, by the way, is intelligent. All energy is intelligent. And that the colors, of the rainbow. If you put that bliss energy more into the red, then that's the intelligence going to operate. If you put more into yellow, that's the intelligence going to operate. And so now you are in the position of where you're going to place that energy. And the answer, of course, like you place that energy intuitively. Like, because that point, decision making is intuitive. You do need a little bit of a structure at that point, as much as is necessary, to know, of course, these states of consciousness, these states of energy. How does the red feel like? Yellow feel like? How's it blue? How's it purple? And then what you want to create out of this. And then you begin the creative process. You try to go into the imagination. You push that light into imagination, which, by the way, this is what means. I don't know if you've seen this movie, Fly Me to the Moon. I've watched this movie lately. It was a pretty good movie. But then, just by, moving around and doing my thing, just the idea came into my head. It's like, what does the fly me to the moon means? And it's like, oh, the moon, the silver, is the mind. To fly your heart to the moon, to make invisible energy visible. That's what DMT states usually bring out. But now, because you're on the other side, you're no longer dealing with clowns and elves and all that stuff. Well, I shouldn't say elves, but definitely no clowns. You are now on that side of pure creativity. And so in a way, like you come to this world to feed on all of this negativity, transmute it, and use it as a creative energy to create something. Okay, and that's pretty much um, the essence of what we're doing here. Okay. Then all the other portals. Some people say that remaining that liminal space is enough because everything is just going to happen for you automatically. I don't see that to be the case. It does not happen to you automatically. You still need to assign the meaning to that energy. What kind of image do you link to that energy? Because you cannot have the creative process until you do that. Now, a lot of times the image arises naturally from that energy. This is why like this type of creativity is different. It's less mechanical. I've noticed like if I just let that energy take the shapes that it wants to take, it may take some sort of like interesting fractals and lights and everything, right? And I think only at that point you would then say, um, um, when you already see what it actually kind of means, what kind of image it actually is, then you can play with it. And I think this is when you use the mind, when you already have that, when you already flew your heart to the moon, when you already have that energy that is invisible as light in here, not as light in your heart. Now you can use it and shape it in any way you want. And then it would be like your mind desire, because your soul desire is obviously alchemize all the negative energies, reconnect, and emanate out into your mind. And then the soul is happy. The soul, as long as it takes the negative energy, transmutes it, emanates into your mind, the soul is happy. And it feels awesome in your heart. It feels amazing, the best feeling in the world, because it's always different, um, always novel. A lot of people, you know, seek novelty, but externally. They seek novelty externally, different things, different people, one relationship, another relationship. You know, that's what promiscuity is. They're seeking novelty outside of it. This is why these people cannot hold on to monogamous relationship, because they're not operating on that holistic view where you could see in each single moment something new within your uh, spouse, you know? And it's like a never ending awesomeness and beauty. Only then you're even capable or even ready to be in a monogamous relationship, which would be genuine, right? Because you're discovering another person from new all the time. The way they feel to you is always mysterious and novel, and then also the way they feel to you is familiar and very close. That's what I would describe as this real monogamous connection with somebody. It is familiarity and mystery in a continuous flux. And it's very interesting because it ends the addiction, and it ends the obsession as well, because it's never ending. It's not that you gave up on it. It's not that you're trying to suppress that desire now. It's just that it's not continuously are being uh, created. Desire comes online and gets fulfilled, comes online and gets fulfilled. And so it's always enough and you can't get enough. Does that make sense? How do I know about this? because this is what I end up by. Keep on alchemizing the energy. I end up with this in this state, and I'm like, okay, so it's got to be this and nothing less, or it's not my person. And that's how it allows me to kind of simplify things. Um, you know, and everything else is kind of a noise. Because when you live in that holistic point, when a person comes into your vicinity, you immediately feel them exactly where they're at and what kind of role they're playing to you. There's no confusion there anymore. That's why decision making with your brain kind of ends. This is why, like before in my life, I would try to still use my brain and my mind in relationships, but it's a trap. But when you go into this liminal space, you're like, oh, everything's okay, all right. There's a complete safety and assurance that being in that state is what it's all about. And if you meet somebody and they, trigger you or challenge you, and okay, there's a chemical challenge, you go through it. If there's a resonance between you two, you resonate. And so, but the end result is what you have in your heart. It's almost like not about the person. It can shine through the person, but like some people may come into your life and trigger the crap out of you, so you could alchemize the thing at the deepest level. But when people just obsess about the person, it's like, well, I need that person. This is my specific person, because then that becomes a trap. Because if you completely alchemize everything to the bones, what you get is a feeling, and this is where you start. This is a feeling of love. This is a feeling of bliss. And if it has any kind of expression with the person, I know that's my person. And if people come into that energy and they don't fit in, you immediately feel that they don't fit in. Okay? Or you may immediately feel of where do they fit in. I say, well, they definitely they're not very close to my heart for sure. They're somewhere in the outskirts, because they're still doing a lot of like this hedonistic thing. So you automatically kind of, they go on the outskirts, because they energetically cannot enter into your field if you are in your liminal space. And then they may be orbiting you if they're very interested in what's that energy like. They may be orbiting you, and you keep them at that orbit, and they will approach you on their own terms. You're just beaming out the energy that already speaks. It says, if you make any decisions that move you closer to peace, love, or light, bliss, if you make any of these decisions, you are going to come closer to me, because this is where I live. And then you don't bother entering other energies. I watched this video, and it was about some story, and the story was about, I think it was just like Atlantis times, and like why the Atlantic civilization failed or whatever. Basically, it's this idea that there was a civilization that is super advanced on Earth, and that they got corrupted. And that the reason it got corrupted is because that these men of light, I don't know why they didn't mention women, because I would suppose, I don't know, but they said that the men of light were mating, or they call them like angels, but men of, to me it's like angel is a state of consciousness. It's not a being. um, a being is something else. But anyway, that's what they would call them. And then that's how angels would have fallen, is because they mated with the human woman, and what happened was is that they lost the way of light. They were sort of like tempted into the hedonistic way of life, and also sort of like the fulfilling the ego fantasies and tantrums and desires and whatnot, right? And that's horrible, because then the whole foundation of the reality, the highest level of infrastructure of the reality, gets inverted, and that's how the evil roams the world. It's only because of these souls who gave in into that hedonistic way of life, and this is why you don't do that. I mean, I always say, like, you fuck up once. I mean, sure, fuck up once hard, but then don't do it again. Now you know. Because if you do it again, now you're just taking a piss. Now Now you're just, you know what I'm trying to say. But you may need maybe a couple of more rounds to really see that it is indeed the case. Whatever, right? But I'm saying that there's no reason why you should fuck up more than once. You can be that sharp. And maybe some young souls fuck up way more, and older souls with more experience fuck up way less. But they do fuck up once. Everybody fucks up once. If you don't fuck up once, then you are still like kind of good at two shoes, and are still wet behind the ears. Okay, so that's basically the pattern. So the idea is that there's no other way, guys. Like, I mean, people are trying to cope within the matrix. Is like, how do you deal with the woman ego? How do you deal with the man ego? This is how you deal with it. This is the only way, and you won't be able to micromanage it and control it in all sorts of ways. This is just unnecessary battle of sexes that's going on, and it's just exhausting, useless, and pointless. This is why, like, I want to communicate that there's this way out, and it's a state of consciousness where the clarity exists and you start seeing things. And by the way, this is where, like, the insights come to you, and then you use your brain to analyze that thing. So it's like a download comes to you, but you do need your brain to see, like, what the fuck is this thing, and they start dissecting it. It's like, oh, and then you use your brain correctly. Now you're analyzing something of gold. You discovered something of gold, and you are now trying to put it in some sort of like a horizontal dimension that could be used as, a tool, art or science, or some creation in the real world. You see, so that's why it's necessary. The horizontal dimension comes in handy now, which is the realm of Chronos, the realm of that thing that was, you cannot destroy it. You got to repurpose it, like this, to destroy the Satan or destroy this, destroy that. You cannot destroy it. You have to repurpose it, because that the devil, that Satan, and that archon, it only happens because there's no union in your heart. That's why it happens. But if there is a union in your heart, it is repurposed for creating, because it's writing the scripts, for creating the skills, the habits, the techniques, the you see what I'm trying to say? You do need it. Because you can download the most incredible thing, but if you don't have the capacity or skill to transmute it into something real of value, then nothing happened. You see? So there. So what do we end up having is this first portal. Okay, this first portal that is like that has to be more like defended by any other type of portals. You want to remain in that portal. You do end up in a kind of a bubble. Now, when you're that type of bubble, you're that 0 point. You can travel through time space, so to speak. Not even so to speak, but you can travel. Not physically, biolocate. With one exception, for example, sometimes people say, well, I saw this person. Because sometimes, for example, this is why sometimes when people see something that is unbelievable and incredible, it was there, but it was sort of like astrally projected into their consciousness. And usually those things are just like the astral and the physical reality overlap. And that's how you see it. That's why you see it. But it's not like it was physical. No matter how real it was, because like when you lucid dream or having, astral body experience, everything's super real. But now imagine just this, and you're interacting with something that is superimposed. Okay? This is why this explains of how the laws of physics in the physical reality is not actually, broken. Because as soon as you break the law of physics, it's no longer physics, right? You now are entering into the world of astral, as I call it. It's not the physical world. Okay, and this is why like this UFO technology and this zero gravity and that discovery of that 0 point and ability to just move the object into 0 point, you go into non-local non-locality. What is a non-locality? That means that you can end up in anywhere in space and time. This is why that technology immediately makes you multidimensional species. Because the breakthrough in a person and in technology is that when you reach that 0 point, a lot of limits fall off, and now we start being this multidimensional being or multidimensional technology. So what's really going on is like the physical object is actually being technically destroyed. It's zeroed out, and now it does not exist, but it exists as a potential in astral, where the space-time is basically fluid, and then you can end up somewhere else. This is why when they move from one point to another instantaneously, they actually completely disappeared, and they could have ended up in any kind of locality of space-time, but they just choose to end up in exactly the same place in exactly the same time, just slightly different space. But that ship could have ended up anywhere in the universe in any possible time. I know it's crazy. You would think that like it's just like that technology is just allows you to instantaneously transport. No, as soon as you go to that 0 point, zero gravity, I don't know what people call it these days now. It's You're time traveling. So you can imagine what people may want to do when they first discover this kind of thing. It completely changes the game. It completely changes the culture. And by the way, this is the the hallmark of the holistic society. By the way, holistic society, everybody participating in it, whether it's like young soul or old soul, has this as a just daily normality of this liminality. This, you see what I'm trying to say? This is why. This is this is why it's like the only way, and guaranteed way to break the matrix, is when you completely break the laws. You don't excuse me. You don't technically break the laws. You just um, supersede them. So, to end up anywhere you want, in any state of consciousness, in any kind of things, you start off with the primordial portal. You start off with this 0 point portal as a beginning. Unless you do that, you cannot enter any other type of portals. This is why, um, with exception in the mind, sometimes, for example, when people train in astral projection and they have not done any kind of alchemy, you can open the portal and you can enter like the time space, but your reality is going to be very limited. I mean, the capacity to travel time space, but your reality is going to be limited to the degree of the coherence that you have. Means that you won't be able to visit the realities unless you go through some process, chemical process that are super high vibrational, and that's, you know, called future, because everything in the astral that is future is higher coherence. Everything that is the past is lower coherence. Nightmares are in the past, and heaven and paradise is in the future. And we play this game from the nightmares, little by little, graduating to the future. And this alchemy is the only way to do this. Now, being in astral, that catalyst for the alchemy may be there. This is why, like, if you read Robert Monroe books, you would see that he was, through the out-of-body experiences, he was confronted with a lot of alchemical challenges, which he dealt with. And also, if you listen to Robert Monroe and you just feel his energy, you could see that that person is just completely, you know, in peace. So, what do we have here? But my recommendation is to go through the heart, fly your heart to the moon, and then start exploring the astral. Because if anything happens in the astral, you're cool. Nothing can really threaten you or bother you, because what you have, behind your back is like a complete and total backup. Like the nose can fuck with you in the astral if you enter from the golden throne. That's why the golden throne is first, the silver throne is second, and only then you have the bronze throne. And these are the games to master: the alchemy, magic, and might. This is why it's alchemy, magic, and might, not might, magic, and alchemy. You see. So there you go. What else I can say? Yeah, entering the liminal space portal assures you that anything else can stem from it is going to be good. So if the first order of the business, this is again, I think Jesus said that God first. I don't like that word anymore because people tend to anthropomorphize it or create a being, an entity. What they do, like with Jesus, I don't like it. It's because there are souls. Souls are the ones who can have different states of consciousness. Souls are real. They can move in any kind of state of consciousness. They have that type of capacity. So to me, when somebody is deifying something that is supposed to be lived through you and another soul in front of you, is distracting from life, right? They don't see that um, they don't feel the God in another person. They don't feel the God in themselves. And when you're alchemizing at this really high intensity, that's Jesus. That's the state of consciousness. This is what I don't like. When the Bible became like allegories and stories, and people are interpreting and finding. No, you just look at the Bible as a consciousness manual, and many of these stories, through their archetypical means, are being produced in life anyway. You can take any kind of story and you'll see the same archetypical stories there. This is why I don't like when people deifying an historical figure. Like, we don't know any of this, right? There might be a soul being that was Jesus, and some people were saying that it was Krishnamurti, was a reincarnation of the same soul that was Jesus. That's what people were saying. And well, people from the Theosophical Society, like investigating these things, like, I don't know how you can verify these things, but that's what they're saying. He, of course, he denied it immediately. So, like, well, we're not creating this nonsense, and we're not making religion out of this. And I'm just gonna teach people consciousness. I'm gonna teach people how to use their consciousness by themselves. And he spent all his life teaching people how to use consciousness by themselves. But he may have as well be the same soul. So that's what I would interact with. Okay? With the soul. I mean, you can interact with archetypes too. But it's an archetype. Yeah, but you know this, when you understand that organizing principle of everything, what people point to when they say God, it's almost like it disappears the need to ever use it. I think that's what the Bible said also, that don't use my name in vain. It means that you don't never need to mention this, because as soon as you name it, you destroy it. You create something else out of it. But if you just leave it be, then you are in a certain type of state of consciousness. It's a type of feeling. You see? All right, guys. I think that's enough. Just give you a little bit like a hold on to something, even though this original portal is something that you cannot hold on to, is always falling. You see, trying to say, like, but you understand that where you're at, and you understand the forces that are trying to take you out of it, and you understand what needs to be done for you to keep remain on your throne. At least this is how I visualize it, and it works great for me. And yeah, and the spiritual war is about remaining there. I wish it wasn't the case. I wish it wasn't true. I wish it wasn't the fact that we live in a demonic matrix. But with alchemy, you can not only remain in your bubble, you can keep on converting all of that crap into good. Okay, and if you just remain continuously being in that liminal state, and which means that whatever you do in life, whatever challenge you because if you try to create your soul desire, the nature is going to oppose this. You're going to have to alchemize it. You have to and maybe I'll make another video about these other portals, which is like what I call like a specific alchemy, when you're already in that state, liminal state, and now you engage in, for example, learning a skill or creating something. And as soon as you engage that, the challenges will arise, and you're going to have to fight for it, so to speak, on this level, to not to leak the energy, not to leak the energy, but bring that energy back to you and keep on creating whatever you came here to create. Okay, so it's type of like a trailblazing creativity that we end up being in when we try to create something in the world. And it is a type of portal that you may also see, for example, because when you have a desire, if you're in a liminal space portal, you can already visit the outcome of that desire, right? Now, after that, you go on living your life, right? Right. Because you're already hitched to the outcome, but on the way there, the challenges are going to keep on continue. You're going to keep on slaying the goblins. You're going to have to keep on slaying the goblins until you get to that outcome. Okay. And to me, for example, in my life right now, the outcome was Philosopher's Stone, if you will. And I was going through life, interacting with people, as normally as possible, and learning everything that I have to learn. And I did not make it about particular specific outcome, because you can lose yourself in it, right? It's like, well, I want this outcome. You say, like, wait a second, but this outcome doesn't have the vibe. You see, like, it doesn't have the vibe. Are you going to go with the specifics now? Are you going to be with a specific person now? Or do you want the quality? And then you have to decide, to say, like, okay, no. Quality first. And you go on the quality. And you say, like, hey, if that person does not reflect these qualities, then I'm not going for the person. I'm going for the quality first. Which is just basically saying that I want to connect, and it's not like, relationships are worthless. No, they bring you a lot of things, but you see what's good in the person, that's resonance, and we see what's bad, that's alchemy, right? When you approach it like that, you get gems out of that relationship. You see, you can be in a very dysfunctional relationship, but really recover a lot of love. You see. Not in the lesson was, the separation, maybe, right? Like the lesson is not to keep on trying to have a union with that person. The lesson was separation. Because in order for you to unify with something that's whole, you got to separate from something that is fragmented. You see. And usually it's the case, you have a addiction to the person, which is not love, but upon alchemizing that addiction completely, you discover love. Okay. Not love is not just for that person, because the person usually may not even register that fact. You may feel a lot of love for that person still upon alchemizing, but you don't have an addiction to it anymore. But then you realize, okay, that's not the love for the specific person. That's just love for the soul that is your like counterpart. And then you don't say that like, well, I want this particular person to fit this thing. You say like, no, this is how it feels like. Whatever fits there, I trust it's going to be it. And it's a different type of approach to life. You're no longer seeking it's very freeing, liberating, actually. Well, that's where I'm at. I don't know if this is completely and totally right, but it feels right to me. Yes, it requires a lot of patience, and you cannot force these things.